Welcome to the Real Triathlon Podcast. I'm your host, Garrick Lowen, here with Nicholas Chase and Jackson Laundry.
And we're back to the Real Triathlon Podcast. And
I'm sure Garrick's gonna love editing that audio of that start.
Now, this is the best way to get your audience's attention from what I've heard based on recent statistics of podcasters, of podcast and assistant podcast hosts of America.
Podcast, assistant podcast, and podcast supervisors.
Well, yeah. Well, this is the first time Jackson and I have been in the same virtual room for a minute, because you went from PTO, US Open to Font-Romeu. Then you were with Joe Skipper and Duberson, and then you just came back home and then had a stag party for Garrick. And I'd like to hear some stories from that, by the way. And then here we are. A lot has happened. And I was in Europe the whole time too, and trying to figure out if I could train and keep her going while managing a Super League team. And I think I did good. I think I did real well.
Okay, well, yeah, it's been a minute. I went and did all that stuff. Busy, went and had a terrible race, and then I'm just, one of those people who, when things aren't going great, I just like to not, I like to try to
You just turn it
back
off
to basics. I just turn my brain off. I'm like, nobody wants to hear about me bitch and moan about bullshit that doesn't matter. I'm just going to go to work and get better and do better in the next one. So sometimes I don't do shit for a while, and Nick's like, "Hey, bud, you want to do something?"
You're like the opposite.
Instagram or something like that. And I'm like, all right, I should probably get on that. So I'm going to be back a little bit more active. And also I'm racing 4 more times this year, probably. So
4.
Yeah. So, gotta pay the bills. And also I feel like I just haven't raced much, and I've been pretty fit and just hasn't worked out, and I'm motivated to go and race and salvage a pretty solid season still. So that's what's up with me.
We'll get into that more and more, because I've got obviously some questions to ask you about, well, first I'll ask you right now, what the hell went wrong? Why you been racing so
We
shit?
covered this all in the last podcast.
All right, so listen to the previous podcast if you want to hear Jackson's real, edited, probably very PG remarks. But I want to know what really friggin' went down. Did you get a hernia? Did you get a hemorrhoid? Were you
Actually, no, none of that. But US Open, I was just sick. So what can you do?
Everybody has been sick in the last 8 weeks for sure, by the way.
Yeah, so I just was feeling terrible on that race and tried to keep it together, but wasn't happening on the run. So pulled the plug. And then for Finland, I was super fit. I think I just was a little flat, probably over tapered a bit, and hadn't finished a race or done like the run portion of a race in 15 weeks. So I was pretty rusty, I think. That was partially due to the canceled Mont Tremblant and then being sick at US Open. So I just didn't have that normal strength and fitness level on the run that I typically do. Prior to that, the swim bike was pretty average. So not really that bad, but not what you want for a world championship, obviously. So
it's weird. The whole dynamics of most of the athletes who've been racing, US athletes, have been paying attention outside of Rudolfo von Bergesen, who just finished 4th at the Ironman World Championship for the men's race in Nice. He was our best contender, and kind of like everybody in Finland, aside from Mark Dubrick. The travel and just getting sick seems to have kind of messed up a lot of folks, except for the Germans. They seem to have really just this is our time zone. This is our neck of the woods. We're coming to bitch slap the world. And I think they did.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a different dynamic than what we've expected, but it's been hopefully still exciting for people to watch. Our boy Mark Dubrick crushed 70.3 worlds. He was probably the only American who actually had a good race there.
Yeah,
maybe the only North American, really. So that was pretty solid. Obviously on the women's side, Paula had a pretty solid day.
Yeah.
And then obviously Taylor winning. But on the men's side, the America has been struggling a little bit. But Nice, we should talk about that for sure.
Well, real quick, Mark sent me a video from the women's race in Lahti, and I counted it. There was 9 motorcycles with Taylor Nib. 9. Not like they were all swarming her like crazy. They were just like in a long 9 motorcycle train. It was insane. What the frig is all that about? 9.
Yeah, I saw it. I took a video too. There's a lot. There's definitely some help there. Yeah, I mean, I think she was going to win no matter what.
True.
Sure. But it's a bit excessive. And like sometimes, they're beside and whatnot, but there's obviously crosswinds sometimes, and that's going to still help. So that I think the same dynamic played out in the men's race. Like that front group was solid, but I just don't see them putting 3 minutes into Sam Long, Lionel working together, Thor Bennings-Madsen working super hard. Like I think there was a little bit of assistance there for sure, but
have we talked about or is on this podcast yet with the DQ for Lionel's center line and imaginary center line infraction?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we talked about that last time.
All right. Well, I think this kind of takes us into our main point of this podcast, and we're going to get into our kind of secondary point with Race Ranger update, and then what they've been doing and how they've been incorporated into some of the races and their future outlook. So Race Ranger, if you don't know, is what the professional athletes have been using to better judge 20 meters for a lot of these PTO races. They've been in some Ironman races as well, but the feedback has been 99.9%. This is what we need. And maybe a little bit of tech delay here and there, people not understanding it, and race brain playing a factor. The other aspect is kind of going to take us into some of this key points in the state of triathlon right now. And what the fuck's going on with the freaking rules and enforcing rules and just like not enforcing rules? And like, it's been crazy this year in terms of inconsistencies for the sport, certain athletes being called for things that others aren't. And I think that it's made us look a bit foolish. And I'm not saying that to point anybody out in particular. I just think as a collective, we have too many rules to try to follow from too many federations and race organizations. And certainly a standardized practice would eliminate all this. We got WTCS, we got Challenge, we got Ironman, we got PTO, and they've all probably adopted a lot of the long course ITU rules, or Ironman has their own set too. So I just find it quite challenging. And that's where I think we could all grow as a unit and support each other more, first and foremost. Jackson, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the Race Ranger just needs to become a standard, and then also the referees actually calling the penalties when the Race Ranger's showing people with multiple violations, because we just haven't seen that either. So that's important for sure, and I don't think we're too far off of that. Hopefully Ironman's open to doing that. I don't know what their status is on that. But when it comes to some of these other rules, like the center line thing was weird. Like with Lionel, I don't really see how or why that's getting called. When I guarantee you 100% of that pro field crossed this like imaginary center line at some point. We had the whole road. There was no traffic the other way. Why would we not? And there was no line on the road. So that was really dumb. But yeah, I mean, as far as like slotting in penalties and all that stuff, I think that's where Race Ranger just comes in huge, because if someone slots in, you can see immediately if there was space or not. So that would just really help with the consistency, for sure. And then, yeah, I don't know. It's part of it. I think the Worlds was a bit weird. The women's side had a ton of penalties.
Yeah, they came out hard with like the first, what I'd say 10 kilometers of the race. If there's a lot of weaving in and out of busy roads to get out of a city, like there's a lot of bunching up and random accordion effects. And there's not really inherent people trying to get away with any drafting, but sometimes the way the course evolves, it's like, it is inevitable that you might get within 6 meters of somebody at some point while hitting the brakes, even if it's for 2 to 5 seconds, and that's going in and out of a corner. And I think with all that bunching up, that's where these penalties were majority called for the women in Finland.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they got so many called that early, because at least where I was at in the men's race, like I was kind of things were strung out at that point, and in the early stage, and then it really bunched up later. And we saw like a huge pack for probably like 20 to 40 or 50K into the bike, or 60. There was a huge pack. So that's where we were seeing more potential for penalties on the men's side. It just played out a lot differently, but yeah, I don't know. Like the thing is that we don't really know where or when they were calling the penalties. Like it's hard to speculate whether it was the corners or what it was. But definitely on the men's side, once we got into those rollers is where the bunching was starting to happen. And so for a while I was at the very back, and I was like way behind, like I was leaving like 20 to 30 meters sometimes to avoid bunching up. And then I just kind of had to keep crossing gaps, but yeah, so on the men's side we didn't see that many penalties. The DQ was dumb, but is what it is. But I get to go head to head with Lionel again this weekend. It'll probably have already happened when this episode comes out, but
Michigan's this weekend.
Yeah, man, 5 days.
Oh, that's fierce, man. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, that's gonna be fun. So myself, Lionel, Trevor Foley, Matt Sharp, and Sam Appleton's on the list. Not sure if he's going, but I believe the rest of us all are. Hopefully Sam is. Give us a chance for some decent points. It's kind of like a battle of all the dudes ranked like 20 to 30th. So we're the B squad showing up and seeing what we can do.
That's pretty. You're not the B squad. Shut your stinking mouth. You guys are not the B squad. I think the what it represents is the depth of what's happening in the sport and how many people are just getting pushed into it and having great races. And I think early in the season with all the, kind of was a slow start to the season, I feel like, with a lot of, Sam Long won almost everything for the first few races in North America. And you didn't hear a lot of the Europeans doing crazy stuff. And then they kind of like went into hibernation until Lottie. And then they came out and smacked it. The PTO races were kind of how you would expect them to go on the women's and men's side, aside from some of the blow ups. But then I think once we hit Finland, Nice, and now these late season races, when people either dug too deep of a hole with crazy travel, getting sick, going to Font Romeu and trying some altitude and not working out. And then we're seeing all these lads.
Hey, don't say it didn't work out yet, brother. I still got the training from that altitude boost in my lungs.
That's right. And you've got an altitude tent skirt, I think.
Yeah. But the altitude definitely worked. Like I came back and like usual, I'm swimming better than I was. Like I've been keeping up with Cody since I've been back, which I just haven't been doing at all the last few years, except for when I come down from altitude. So I know my swim is good, and I'm feeling solid on the bike run. So just trying a bit of a different taper, pushed it a little bit more. Like I trained pretty hard Sunday, Monday, Tuesday this week. So I haven't started my taper till tomorrow. So 4 days out, pretty much a rest day. And then I'll kind of do some tune up after that. So we'll see how that plays out. But also that's because I'm racing the following weekend in Augusta. So I've got to kind of keep the fitness pretty high coming into the first one, and then see if I can put together a good second race, which earlier this year I did that in St. George, and then whatever the second one was called, Gulf Coast, and I got third at both. So hoping for at least that good, hopefully better, and hoping to get some decent points. Gotta freaking keep myself in the mix. I'm going to be losing my world champs result here in whenever that is. So that's going to suck. And I got to kind of stay relevant.
Well, don't worry. I got your back. We're going to be developing a race series that excludes anybody from the top 50. So,
but then I won't get any points.
You'll get tons of points because we're going to have $100,000 purse, and everyone's going to come up from the top 50, 49, 50. They'll be there. They'll get tons of points.
Okay, but I'm like 25. So
I'm just saying, you'll still get, if we get 100 to 50, that's going to be still half
All
the
right, that'll
field.
be good for you guys.
It'll be good for you too.
I'll come out and cheer.
Yeah, I agree. I think you are primed to have a bit of I dare say, a comeback event where you're feeling that you can at least perform. That's key. If you can walk away knowing that you gave a good bet, then that's every triathlete's dream. Even if you come in third or something like that, that's really all you can hope for.
Yeah, this year I've been third, DNF 27th.
Not too bad. Still got about a 10th average.
Yeah, it's true.
So that's kind of what's up for Jackson. I think Mark is gonna figure out his racing schedule. Maybe I think Fuerteventura in Brazil has popped up as
I just heard that might have been canceled. I think Matt Hansen told me that'll be canceled.
there you go. That one's probably may work, may not. We'll figure it out. We got some South American racing coming up.
Oh no. Axe that. He said Challenge Santa Marta is canceled.
Oh, shame. I think that was on everyone's radar, that race. Gonna have to cancel those flights. So that's probably a lot of folks are going to pop up to the South American Championship. We've got I don't know if I'm breaking any news, but I don't think Clash Daytona as a pro race is going to be happening. So that means pretty much we'll have 60 people at Indian Wells at the last race on North American soil for the season, I'm pretty sure. So that'll be a dig. Well, our women's field, I don't know. I don't even know what they're doing. I know there's text threads going on within the tri squad, but I just forget. And my brain has been so busy.
Let's get into that. What have you been doing that's making you give you a good excuse for forgetting what our women are doing on the team?
Yeah,
I feel like you haven't even been freaking home. You've been like in all these European places. He told me he was like he had a week traveling between like France and Spain or something, and he trained 28 hours that week. So let's hear about this.
Yeah, it was great actually. So I kind of made the coaching swap to Mr. Jim Vance, and then we had maybe a week and a half or 2 weeks after I came back from my Michigan midseason break, and then immediately whipped me back into reality. So that sucked. And then I had to go to London to manage our RTS Warriors Super League team, which I was like, this was something I put on my absolute have to do for us as a team to help build the sport, expose the brand to a global audience, and just make RTS a bit more of a brand that people can rely on for care, results, fun, and just a good company who cares about everything triathlon forward. So that's why I knew all the marketing and building an American team for this kind of I guess the premier league of triathlon when it comes to Olympians. I forget how many gold and silver and bronze medals we had amongst London and Toulouse, but it was massive. So went to London. I'm working crazy hours. I'm making sure I'm available. I'm trying to be a personality for the sport. Lucky for me, I get to be surrounded by such amazing talent, people, creators. That was good. And then Toulouse happened. I had, I think, 4 days in France, which is almost by the Pyrenees, almost to Andorra, where Toulouse is, so the south of France. Just incredible riding. And I took my bike over there, and I just knew I had to get about 30 hours of training that week because I'm still trying to focus on a career myself. So within all the 3 or 4 days at an Airbnb, just getting up early, swimming with the Project Podium kids, which was great, 50-meter pool for like a whole week. And then getting to the Super League hotel, training with, I'm in a lane with Johnny Brownlee's next to me. Then we got Blumenfeld next to me with Hayden Wild and with him, and just the who's who of, Alex E and all that stuff. Those people who've been there, done that, and creating a huge wave for the short course area. And then even Blumenfeld with just doing everything. So just inspired beyond belief. So I knew I had to keep the full gas. Our team did really well the first race, the Warriors. We were like second ranked with points. And then we really had a tough go at Toulouse. And the biggest problem is the Olympic points catch. Everyone's trying to get their last qualification for their selection for the Olympic 2024 in Paris. And That means most of our women's field is really tapped out, trying to, Gwen Jorgensen's won 2 races in the last couple weeks. Gina Serrano also won. We've got Chase McQueen, who did really well. So we've got some Olympic caliber athletes who are trying to get their slot. Taylor Spivey needs Pontevedra is like the last auto qual opportunity, I think. And that's maybe this weekend and the next weekend. I think it's next weekend. So that's a big one for everybody shooting for those Olympic tattoos. So anyways, I just kind of had to do my job, try to build the sport for USA. RTS is doing everything we can to invest and be relative and help the short course transition to long course opportunity between Project Podium and us. And then also we've got cool investors who want other companies to succeed. So we're trying to buy into companies who are doing well. And this is just with the only goal of all this is to generate enough income through all of our work to support long course triathlon. The short course stuff with Super League is easier to broadcast and get people behind, but we want all of our long course athletes to still have a great life and not just be dying for prize money. And Jackson, hate to say it, but this hasn't been as a lucrative year for you in terms of podiums and bonuses. So I'm sure it sucks.
Well, I'm all right. I'm just
I know you're all right and you've been smart about everything you have done, but it's just an extra. And even Collins Cup not happening, it's like people are the variability index of triathlon has been quite high for probably that position 20 to 8 in the world rankings. I think everybody above that has done well this year for sure. So yeah, I think that's our main goal anyways as a team.
Yeah, no, definitely the variabilities, it's it encourages like you to make more conservative decisions, because let's say I didn't do worlds and I was like, okay, I'll do US Open and then I'll go do some of these smaller ones around, like I would have made way more money. But you take that gamble, and if you have that really good day, like I still think at worlds, like I'm capable with the way that race played out. I'm still capable of getting into that league group. I really am. I didn't have a very good swim. I dropped my freaking cap and lost more time trying to go back for that. Like I don't know. I need to do better at getting there and actually doing what I can do. I know I'm better than what I've been doing these last few months. So that's the frustrating part. And I'm just like kind of pissed off that I can't just learn these lessons more quickly. Like I've had those days where I show up and I perform really fucking well, and then somehow I don't have the formula figured out for what was it that made that happen. So and I don't think it's a training. I think it's more like the prep leading, like the last little bits of prep, like that's important, because you have to be so sharp to get into that league group when you're a bubble guy like me. Like you can't afford to be a little bit off. If you're Mark Dubrick and you're 2% off in the swim, you're still getting out of the league group.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the little things I need to kind of hone in. But that's where racing at these kind of smaller races, lower stakes, like we're going in Friday for this race for Sunday, 2 nights, like you just show up from your house, you pretty much the 3 days before, and then you're like, all you do is you go to your pro meeting, you figure out the course, drop your shit, and you go race. And like it's so much easier to get it right. Hopefully they have a world champs back in North America again, because that'll be nice.
Yeah, it certainly seems to help you when you're racing a championship on not as crazy time scales and travel and everything like that. Most North Americans to that fact.
Yeah, I still don't seem to have the time changes figured out. Like it's kind of been, I did a couple of good ones in Europe like 3-4 years ago, or 2 to 3 years ago now, but then since then it's been kind of crap. So just figuring that out. But in any case, it's part of the learning. And when you have a bit of shitty results, it makes the good ones feel that much better. So
yeah,
good to have the support of the team. And by the way, having Mark have that breakthrough day was freaking unreal, man. Like that was so sick to see that.
Yeah.
Like, once I was packing it in on the run, everyone I saw, I just kept asking how Mark was doing. And they would be like, oh, he's in 12th. And then I'd run like another 2K and they're like, we think he's in 9th. And then he gets 8th at the line. That was freaking dirty.
Yeah, I think our team is really turned into a strong community of people supporting each other. And I think that's the point of it is, even if everybody has a bad day, the fact that one person on the team still has a crusher, it just makes your day still feel like a sting, but it gives you something to celebrate with everybody. And that's kind of what I've always felt why a team is important for a solo sport. So back to one of the other topics I wanted to hit, the state of triathlon. We've got PTO putting on those two opens, US Open, and then Asia, or is it the Asian Open? Is that what it's called?
The Asian Open, yeah, Asian Open for PTO.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that was PC to say, like, is Asian Open allowed?
Yeah, it's in Asia, so it's the Asian Open.
I'm just making sure, man. I don't even know. So we had those two happen, and then everyone went to Finland who went from there. And then everyone who went from that race to Finland, I think, mainly had some issues with illness. A few didn't, a few got off okay. Some athletes did pack in some good cash. Taylor Knibb, one of them. Ash Gentle, one of them. Christian Blumenfeld, one of them. And then I think with those PTO races going on and the caliber of, I dare say the caliber of broadcast, because I still think there's work to do. But then we had the Ironman World Championship men's race in Nice just this weekend. Clearly, for Americans, when there's a different time zone and you're waking up and they're already on the run, it takes a little bit away from the luster of the live event. And would people go back and watch it? I don't know. But I know that when it is in Hawaii, it's nice to have a race watch party. And maybe that's like the Europeans probably can't do that because their time zones are so different too. So I think as much as it's nice to honestly get it in different countries, it's tough to really get behind a race that you can't really participate in your time zone, or make part of your life, or you've really got to work hard. And then some races falling off, prize money, still being high for PTO. I don't know what it was for the Ironman World Championship men's and women's race for Kona and Nice, but I don't know. It just feels like different. How do you feel about it?
About what? Just how the state of the sport is going?
Yeah, like what is the Ironman 140.6 distance still something everybody's shitting their pants over? Or is the 100K distance PTO race, wow, that's the new distance people want to watch?
I don't know. I think I feel like among the actual fans of triathlon, that still seems to be more or less the same group. I don't know how much traction the PTO is getting to like spread their wings and sort of gather a bigger audience. But among the people who are real triathlon fans at this point, I think that the 140.6 is still kind of considered like the big deal. So for now, I think that's it. But I also think people really like watching the 100K, and like you watch that 100K race, it's 3 hours, basically 3.5 hours. Like it's not that crazy to watch that. Like that's the length of like a long movie. So most people, if they're into it and they kind of know about it ahead of time, they'll be like, all right, yeah, I'll watch that on a Friday night or a Saturday night. But yeah, the Ironman World Champs it's just so long, and yeah, the time zones. I still think it's way better in Hawaii because even still, it's starting in probably like the early evening in Europe.
Yeah.
So that's not too bad. I mean, you can't really stay up for the whole thing, but yeah, I don't know. It seems like more or less they're not really planning around the time zones. Like I think PTO is doing it a little bit more. But it'd be interesting to see like numbers of what these broadcasts are actually seeing for views. And I really don't think most people are rewatching the World Champs. Like I just woke up in the morning. It was a Sunday morning for whatever Nice, and they were like halfway down the run or something, and that was where I started watching.
Yeah. I know it's different. Did Ironman maybe hurt their sport, their, I guess, bubble of the sport by putting too many people in Kona last year and kind of getting shunned out by the local government and populace by just overcrowding it things are too expensive. I mean, I don't think Kona is the answer. That's not what I'm saying. I just don't know if making the world championship as include as many people as you can was the right move to keep the championship level event as such. So that's where it feels like I heard comments from people not really complaining, but just saying I was offered a spot to Nice or I was offered a spot to Kona and I finished like almost last in my age group. So I think it's hard to get people to buy into this new championship system with the numbers they're trying to get there. So yeah, I don't know. I hope PTO sticks around. I hope Ironman can still be a dominant participation aspect of our sport, but I just have to say, being part of the Super League event and having that only be a broadcast sport, only be something that is there to entertain. It was like the WWE at Toulouse. I mean, the crashes were terrible, but unavoidable when athletes are sending it so hard. The disqualifications for, helmet straps, or the Hayden Wild making a mistake coming in transition riding, Leo Berger doing the same thing. There's just a lot of fun drama. And I think there's a lot of synchronicity between these athletes because they do race multiple distances. So I really hope that people can start to buy into watching almost all triathlon as much as they do any sport. But I think it has to be entertaining and fun. And a 4 or 3 hour race is tough to watch when the broadcast is stuck to 2 or 3 butts the whole time on a bike on the broadcast. I'd love to see some more depth in the race. That's all.
Let's be honest, triathlete butts are usually pretty minimal.
Good old fashioned pancake butt. That's what we are looking for in this sport.
Yeah. It has a ways to go for sure. The Super League stuff's crazy. It's definitely fun to watch and made to be fun to watch. So there's stuff that can be learned from that for sure. But yeah, we'll see what happens. We just got to keep showing up and taking the chances we're given. So hopefully people still like watching it at some point here. So on that, in terms of races that are going to be happening and people can watch, what are you doing the rest of the year, my friend? I heard something about a Mexican destination.
Yeah, so not this weekend, but when you're in Augusta, I'm going to go race in 70.3 Cozumel, and then I'm going to go straight from Cozumel to Malibu for the Super League race there, which is looking to be our American kind of grandstand of our team. We've got the best top-ranked Olympic women that we could get our hands on, and the best-ranked men. Morgan Pearson's already in for the Olympics in Paris. He's going to come race with us. We've got still Chase, Seth, and some other, talents. I don't want to.
Doobie.
Well, Dubrick is not going to do Malibu, but he'll be in there for Saudi Arabia and Neom. I mean, I'll just come out and say it. I had to make a tough call, honestly. And this is part of why it sucks to be a team manager who is putting athletes in and out of positions to perform. Mark came off of an exceptional performance at 70.3 Worlds. And then at Toulouse, when we put him in, he probably wasn't set up for the best day given that performance he had at Worlds. And it was only 1 week later. He didn't have a lot of time on his road bike, but still,
and his luggage got delayed and he was all messed up in travel and stuff.
Yeah, it was not ideal, but even so, his bike handling, I think, needs some work in the Super League sport. And I think a couple of weeks to fix that, especially with all the commitments he had in Nice, wasn't really going to work. And then he did mention that they didn't make the swim a priority, him and his coach. And I was kind of pissed about that because we talked with him and his coach about how valuable Super League we needed him to be on top of it. And it's like, you guys didn't put him in a good position to have the best Super League event. And that wasn't the priority. So it is what it is. So bottom line, the young fella, 18-year-old sub 4-minute miler, who's also a good triathlete. His name's Reese Vanderson. He's gotten us 8 points at every race guaranteed. And that's as good as finishing 8th place, which, let's face it, he probably would finish, outside the top 15 or right there. So he wouldn't have gotten us much points, maybe 1 or 2, but he can take the fastest run split for every race and get 8 points for the fastest run. And then he also will get paid out 15 grand at the end of the race series for having the total accumulated run points for the entire series. So like I would have been called an idiot if I didn't put Reese in there and give him a chance to hold that run split bonus and get us 8 points. Because again, this is a team event, and I've got 10 other athletes who are trying to get team money from finishing second or third place in this series and getting a bigger paycheck. So if I don't make every point count, I'm the asshole. So it was a hard call, and I had to.
Doesn't sound like that hard of a call to me.
Well, it's hard because I had to tell Mark, and I had to be
Yeah.
like, hey man, we got to go with a guaranteed 8 points, and I'm sorry about that. But I still think, given the time and preparation he has for Neom and Saudi Arabia, I think Mark's going to be a great asset there. There's no doubt in my mind. So hopefully he still comes out, and I think we're going to go do he might come spectate the race, have fun, and we'll go do something afterwards and try to get him a bike partner sponsorship.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Ripping her. Mike is getting stronger on the bike every freaking race, man. I swear it takes me longer and longer to pass that bastard.
Yeah.
This time I caught him. I probably passed him at like 65K, maybe about that on the bike. He was like one of the later guys to lose that second group. And then I did put a lot of time into him the last bit, but he freaking flew on the run, boys. He really flew.
That was unreal. I can't wait to see what he does. I can't wait to see what you do. I know you, Lionel, and Trevor Ravioli are going to give her a real good rip.
Trevor Ravioli.
I
Trevor's a great guy, but I don't know why, because Foley can rhyme with so many things.
I know. He's Trevor Goalie. I don't know.
I've heard a few others. So yeah, you're doing Cozumel, and then
Oh yeah, sorry. And then I'll do Super League, and then probably Cabo.
We're doing Cabo.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have
Cabo.
we're gonna have a bunch of RTS there, trying to get everybody we can. That's gonna be a sick race. And then I've got to go to Saudi Arabia for Neom, and then I've got Garrick's wedding, and then a U2, and then I got Ironman Cozumel.
Wait a minute. How are you doing Neom and his wedding? It must be the same weekend.
It'll be before. I think his wedding's first. I think his wedding's the 12th, right?
Yeah.
And then I think it's so wait, Neom's in October, so that's clear. And then I go to training.
Cabo's the first weekend in November.
Yep. Then Cabo, then Garrick's wedding.
Yeah.
And then I've got Ironman full distance Cozumel, which I'm going to go try and really podium in that.
Jeez, just call him Nick, the Mexico racing man.
There's nothing else, man. There's nothing. I didn't want to go to Brazil. I didn't want to go to freaking Israel. That's a huge travel from the West Coast. It's just made sense logistically to get those. And I've done Cozumel full and half and Cabo, so it just makes sense.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you want to make sure you'll never get a penalty in Mexico, just get MEX on your kit, big letters, and just maybe a green version of the kit, and you'll be good.
Well, I've already got really good tan, so I think I'll pass no matter what.
Yeah, just make sure you don't have any USA, nothing. Nope, that's not good.
I'm going to put some white, red, and green on my body.
Well, it seems like we've pretty well gotten through what we can get through today. I haven't talked to Nick for more than a few minutes in a while, so this has been fun.
Yeah, this has been great, man. And of course, are any of your races going to be broadcasted?
I haven't even looked. I wouldn't be shocked if Michigan and or Augusta are. They're doing most of the American ones.
Yeah.
So one or the other probably will, and then Indian Wells was last year, but I don't think it is this year, and then Cabo probably won't. So hopefully one of these two are. Get that RTS up there,
and then follow on from this, you'll hear from Race Ranger, who we are huge advocates for, especially with all the hard work and tech. And I think that the tech advantages for this are outside of just drafting. I think for the professional athletes, it's vital to have this 20-meter and 12-meter draft zone easily identified by us and the referees, and then athletes who are getting more negative time, which is like if you're close more often than not, the seconds are ticking. And then you can figure that out. But I think for the age group demographic, if this ever rolls into hypothetically an Ironman event, if you put this transponder on your bike, you'll obviously get the draft, non-draft signals, but real-time location of your athlete for the entire race. I think that is the most beneficial thing, to know exactly where your person is, because the tracker takes speed at the timing mat and position at the timing mat, and then you could blow up, you could get a flat. You're not going to be at the next predicted timing mat within whatever range, and they don't know where the hell you are. So I think that's where Race Ranger also has additional technological advantage, or whatever advantages. That's the word. And I think that's kind of what we're hoping for, is that they get put into mass participation events. So when you see Race Ranger as an option one day, opt in for it. It'll probably cost you a little extra, but I think it'll add a lot more value to your experience. And maybe one day they'll make that as like, if you don't buy into Race Ranger, you can't be qualified for a championship event or something like that. I don't know. There has to be some way to make sure that it's right. Maybe not. Maybe that's
I think expanding it to the age group level would be tough, just in terms of the numbers and complexity of having to set every unit up and all that stuff. But I think there's potential there, or maybe it could be an option and there's some perks that go with it or something like that. But definitely for the pro side, it needs to just come in, and needs to be at every pro race, in my opinion. And I don't think it's that hard. Like, it's not that crazy to do that.
No. And they've got the kits. Now they're just waiting to integrate with the referees to give them the data on the tablet that would be on the driver's back. So I think that's the last phase of this thing, getting better data, and then giving the people who actually have to make calls opportunities to make the right call, not just like, I think it's probably, no, he's safe for sure safe. And you're definitely not. Let's call 0 penalties just to be safe, and then let all the really fucked up penalties, just let them ride.
Yeah, let's put an end to that era.
Well, cool. Well, hey, dude, this is awesome. Thanks for hanging with me. We'll get another episode next week.
Is this on video podcast?
We're going to throw the video podcast up because we haven't done that in a minute either.
Perfect.
And join our Patreon, support the team. You can get a shirt and stuff like that. And Jackson will send you a full body shot posing in the mirror once a week.
That might have to go for a different price, but
all right. Peace out.
Oh,
for now. James, thank you so much. It is great to have you back on the show. We've really had a lot of growth on everything. You know, we just got through our big Super League push. PTO has just had the US and Asian Open, and other large events throughout the old sport have just gone crazy with, just a lot of drama. And what have you been doing through all of this, and where have you been in the last couple of months?
Yeah, it's been a pretty crazy few months. So we did Ibiza in May, and that was 2 races for us. It was the Saturday for the PTO and the Sunday for the World Triathlon Long Distance Champs, which was a pretty good test for us for a turnaround of events from one to the other. And then the week after, we did another little race, a local race in Spain, the Spanish National Long Distance Champs. And actually, that was a really good lesson. It really chucked down with rain the entire race. And it was in full Ironman distance race. And we had probably about 5 or 6 out of the 70 units being used actually took on some water, which was really good to find out. We had done a whole lot of water testing and waterproofing, but initially the devices we have at the moment started out as kind of looks nice prototypes. They weren't really meant to become an in-race unit, and it just sort of evolved into, okay, we need to actually use these in races. Let's try and waterproof them. And yeah, it turned out that it wasn't as waterproof as we thought, which was really good to learn. So from there, we got them all back to New Zealand. It was a bit of a mission. Because they've got batteries in them, I can't fly with them. They have to go on DHL air freight. It's like a big drama to book it. And so I had to leave them there in Spain. And a few weeks later, basically, because some of them had water in them, we didn't know which had and which hadn't. We had to remove the batteries to be able to air freight them again because of the dangers of the batteries. And so I basically had to fly a young Kiwi guy who was based in the UK over to Spain, rent a car, pick them up, go to France, pick up the other set, basically do a 3-day mission, open them all up and remove the batteries, and then be able to freight them back. So a bit of a rework through, well, that was probably June. And then we started preparing for our next bookings, which were we had, gosh, where did we go? In August, I went to Milwaukee and back from New Zealand, so quite a trip. And then a quick turnaround again to Paris. So we're at the Paris test event. I've still got a day job at Specialized. I've had that over 10, 11 years now. I've now resigned, but I've had quite limited leave. So these trips have been, fly in night before the race, kind of thing, quite tight to be able to.
Well, last time we spoke, you were still with Specialized, so man, things must be going well. You were like, we still got some investors who were like, hey, if you need to pump the brakes and just work on this full time, we got you. So that's great.
Exactly. So I've put the notice in now, and I'm still there at the moment, but it's a bit more free, which is good. So we went to Paris, and so in Paris we're doing the para test event. Obviously not the draft legal World Triathlon Series type stuff, but the para guys who race draft legal, guys and girls. And that was a great experience working on the bridge there where transition was. And a whole lot of protocol around that event. Just, obviously Olympic level, everything is basically as if it was the Olympics. So you've got, massive security. I had to book the time of day I was going to arrive with my gear, what the number plate of the vehicle was, all this kind of thing to be able to get in and out the venue. Bomb sweeps, next level stuff. And we had to, months ahead, we had to explain which frequencies and wireless technologies we're using so they didn't interfere with other things at the venue. Just like the highest level of anything you can imagine. So really good to get through that. Back home in New Zealand now. And next week I'm going to over to Europe again for the Pontevedra, the last race of the Para Series in Spain.
It's a big race.
Yeah, it is. Then I'll go to a couple of meetings in Europe and come home. So another little 2-week trip. That's sort of our last race we got planned at the moment. And then we're going to, because of the issues we found with the waterproofing and a number of other improvements we wanted to make, we're going to build a fresh set of units, which are more of a product than a prototype. They're going to be a lot more robust and, really well waterproofed, which will be in use, next year, and hopefully for a couple of years. That'll last us. And as the calendar for next year starts taking shape, start taking those bookings and working out, how many we actually need if we get a double booking, how many are going to be at one race, how many get the next, that kind of thing, where they're going to be. We don't know where these PTO races are yet, and that kind of thing. So
I think we're expecting that announcement this week. I believe this is the week of the 5th or 4th of September. So I think we're supposed to hear some venues, right?
Cool. I thought it was October, but now would be great. So
I don't know. There's news everywhere, and I don't know which news I'm getting that's accurate. But to the point of more racing, it sounds like the need has been validated through and through, and now you've taken that need and you've designed. So, I guess what's going to change within the overall aesthetic, and maybe some high level, addresses you needed to make on the technological side. What are 2 things?
So the enclosures won't, like how they look, probably won't change a hell of a lot. We'd love to make it a bit smaller if we can. And because these are going to be just for pro use, we can probably shrink the battery down a fair bit, which takes up a lot of the space in there. But we're just starting.
That means you won't need the full, 16-hour.
Yeah, we've got them, they'll run all day. Like we used them at an Ironman earlier in the year, and none of them, got below 60% of their battery life. Wow. So there's plenty of juice in there. And if they, if we're just going to be keeping them for pros and they're just for a season, we can probably reduce that size. But we're going to kick that off tomorrow. Actually, we're going to have a meeting up in Christchurch with all the engineers and designers and start the process of the redesign and evaluate what we've got and what needs to change.
Well, real quick, that 2032 CR 2032 little battery we put in our power meters, and literally it seems like everything within this sport. How would it drain that versus what you all have?
I couldn't give you the numbers, but that's quite a bit smaller. Yeah. So these are, if you imagine, you know how you used to be able to take cell phone batteries out of your phone and they sort of had that foil around them.
Yeah.
These are like those. They're sort of flat, and yeah, they're probably about the third of the size of those. They're 1500 milliamps for the technical people out there.
Wow.
At the moment. So they're not massive, but they're quite substantial. There's a lot going on that they need to power.
Okay. Yeah, lighting, obviously, situational awareness, and the communication with other brains around the area. Okay, so a couple changes there. I think I do have some questions in their actual operation during races, but I want to kind of first and foremost, how do you mentioned it's going to be just for professional athletes, and now as a business model, I know when we first had you on, it was like, we'd like to scale this to mass participation. And I think, we were all kind of scratching our heads as to like, would people accept that? Is it really necessary? And well, I guess after Lottie was seeing the massive penalties like everywhere, have you gotten more requests from the age group demographic? And what is that looking like from the initial, let's outfit the entire field, to, oh, well, maybe right now we just stick for the professionals? How's that really kind of evolution taking place?
Yeah, no, definitely still heading towards age group use. That's where we're going. We see the pros as a great way to get the age groupers to understand it, and kind of we are getting a lot of requests for, hey, when's this coming to age groups? We've done a whole lot of market research with various age groupers from all around the world, mainly obviously Europe and North America, different sexes, different ages. Some people who are just going into their first 70.3 or Ironman, some who are lifetime athletes, and overwhelming messages that people do want this. They're prepared to pay a bit more on their entry fee for it. It would make
how much?
That's the question. So we won't put any numbers out there yet because we're not sort of at the stage with the events, but
okay,
a reasonable amount. So obviously you get this focus group type thing where you get a one-on-one interview with someone, explain what it's all about, without trying to be too salesy with it, because you want them to keep an objective view, and then you throw some numbers at them, and it's sort of, do you consider this number to be cheap, expensive, or no way, get out of town? And the expensive ones, where you end up. So what they're telling us,
$49.99.
that's probably more at the higher end. So yeah.
Okay.
But we're comfortable that people are happy to pay for it. They see the benefit in it, not only in making their race fairer, but in those busy races, keeping everyone apart would be just a lot safer. And obviously safety has been a big concern and issue this year at those hectic races. So we've got other things we want to add to it, like the improved live tracking with the Ironman tracker app.
Yeah, that was my next question. Are you able to key these units with an actual transponder that correlates to a race bib?
They definitely link to the bib. What we're going to do so obviously we need to connect them to the referees yet. So we've just got this light system at the moment, which is being used by the athletes and the referees to varying degrees. But we really need to get that connection going to the referees so that they have a tablet in front of them with information that they can view, relatively remotely. And when we have the infrastructure we need to achieve that can also be used to improve the live tracking. So those are two other projects we're going to build up this year as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I was thinking how this could be a valuable technology for the even non-draft, for the ITU or short course racing. And I think situational awareness of every athlete on course, as you have like in Formula One, when you look at the track, you can see exactly where Verstappen is versus Logan Sargent, who might be lapped or whatever. It just lets the crowd and the audience and the officials know, well, the moto's coming up on this lapped athlete, etc. I think situational awareness on course is a big lack, especially for the viewer who only usually gets to see the very tippy end of the course. So I think there's way more applications that this technology probably has opened doors for. And that's probably my next question is, what are the you intended to kind of eliminate the problem with drafting. That was Race Ranger's main goal, and situational awareness for the athlete to know how close they are between athletes. What other doors have opened now that you've established this technology, and where does this look like it? Like, what are the 3 and 4 other things that you can do now?
Yeah, we're trying to stay really focused on triathlon because that's what we know, and we have the connections there and the good understanding of the problem. And we also don't want to spread our focus too wide. There's enough issues just with that one complicated problem as it is. But obviously there's cycling there with their time trials. There's also the problem with motorbikes in both our sports, as you said. With a fairly small adaptation to the hardware, it'd actually be an easier problem for us to solve, the drafting off the motorbikes. So we see that as a bit of an opportunity that down the line we could go after. But as you say, like getting an understanding of who's around you and how far away they are, where they're positioned, and then using that in some way is something we want to do down the line for sure. If you can imagine, let's say the Tour de France, you've got a stage of the race, and for whatever reason, whether it's the motorbikes or improving the broadcast, these devices are on the bikes, and they know which rider's directly in front of them, beside them, 4 back, 5 in front, and we somehow can capture that either through putting a SIM card on each of them, which we don't currently do, or having like a listening station on the motorbikes or the race vehicles around them at the front and the back of the peloton, and they have a strong internet connection, and we can capture that bunch positioning and sort of create a graphic of where everyone is in relation to each other. There's some pretty cool stuff that you could be doing with that, I think. And it's very, it's not just a rough GPS pinpoint. It's very accurate measurements around you. So if we can get that out, there's graphics you could put on the broadcast, but then we, start thinking about things like Zwift or Ruby or Full Gas, these kind of platforms. You could represent the riders as they are in the peloton, rubbing shoulders, etc. You could then, buy a pass to ride the last 2 hours of stage 7, and whether it's, it'd be a couple of weeks after the fact to start with, probably to create it. But one day, let's go one day, 10 years, 15 years, you log in and you're actually in the race while it's happening. So instead of just watching the tour on the couch, you're rubbing shoulders with, Van der Poel and all these guys, and moving yourself through the bunch, and you level your FTP with, you baseline out the FTPs so that, if you put a bit of it, you basically so you can keep up.
Yeah. So you just want to make sure you can keep contact, and otherwise no fun.
Yeah. So you kind of feel like you're in the race as it's happening, and you could feed the director sportifs, commentary into your headphones as if you're actually in the race. Maybe we could even capture the audio on each rider, so that if you move from, say, Cav's wheel past him, you might say something to the guy as he rides past him, and you move up to the front, you can hear the team actually yelling at each other as the lead out train comes together, that kind of thing. So, and the pings of the gears. But who knows? We've got a lot of ideas, but as I say, trying to stay real focused on the issue at hand. It's complicated enough, and
it is.
We think it's a nice little niche to start with for us. So going after it.
So where you started, where you are now, some of the problems you've found. I think one of the major problems, and I'd like to hear if you have, a solution that's in the books on this, is the travel aspect, that you're having to carry these transponders with the batteries. And, what is that going to look like once you have, 2,000 units that are at multiple races around the world? Are you just going to have maybe a geographical hub, probably, that you're just sending within country once everything's set up?
Exactly. Yeah. So the plan is to, when we make that first, large set, and even for next year, when we're doing a proper season, to have a set that's just based in Europe, and a set that's in the US or wherever it need to be. When you get to that sort of scale, you don't want to be air freighting. It'd just be a huge, like a container almost full of them. And having a large van or a truck that can house the charging apparatus that they all will go into and move from race to race, and all the gear to deliver at the event. It's basically kind of like the timing company, but probably with a bigger vehicle and a couple more people. It could actually be the timing company, who knows? But
I've got some ideas on that too. Huh. Yeah, we'll talk some more after this show offline real quick about ways we could probably help with that too.
Cool. Yeah. But
Okay.
yeah, next year for sure. Me in a little van driving around Europe will be how it's working probably.
Yeah, I could see that being fun, but then being like, fuck, another weekend on the road dealing with these dirty transponders, age groupers, and pro athletes. I know it's alluring for the first bit, but once you've been doing it for
Yeah.
a few years, I'm sure it's a grind. So I know this labor of love you've been putting in has to have been a bit draining here and there.
Oh
On
yeah,
the mind.
definitely. It's been challenging, but it's just like being an athlete. You gotta have the good days and the bad days. You just gotta keep plugging and take little steps and keep moving forward.
Well, being on the other side of the thing, having managed the Super League team in London and France the past 2 weeks, I can tell you that, and I don't know if I'll get canceled for saying this, but it's been a lot easier to be an athlete than actually on the other side of the event where you're stressing about 10 other things. You're an athlete, you're just focused on yourself and what you can do on the day. But you don't really look around at all the moving parts, even the stands where the bikes are, the racks, the bins, the gating, like everything requires this massive movement. And just being part of the broadcast and being on camera and understanding what they're doing, like there is a very expensive show going on all around you every time you show up for a massive Ironman event. And that has been crazy to me. And I think it's been the most exhausting aspect working with Super League, is that I'm more stressed out on race day than any athlete probably is, because I can't participate. I can't do it. So I'm sure you've all had to experience that, and probably it looks organized to regular people, but man, shit is not as organized as it looks.
Yeah, no, it's events are crazy. Events are so stressful. To be in the event business would just be a nightmare. I was a bit of an event organizer for Specialized here in New Zealand for a while. Did all our conferences and things, and yeah, nothing more stressful than an event
Yeah.
preparation. And you get appreciation for, oh, they've got porta potties. How'd they get here? Oh, they've got 6 of them. Wow, good effort. And you see the breakdown and the build. It's pretty impressive. But
Even the mechanic,
yeah,
like that mechanic who you're just like dying to have help you, like there's 1,000 people who've come to him or her with the same thing, and that person has just been not eaten, not gone to the bathroom for 4 hours just so they
yeah,
can take care of you. So anyways, a bit of a tangent, but I've seen these units in operation specifically at the PTO events, and this has kind of been something that's been a bit of a sore subject. I think the PTO, with all their intentions, have been doing everything they can to create a positive name for their venues, their sport interpretations of the rules. And what we've seen this year is kind of a lot of lessons learned. I'll call them, in a very nice way. And specifically when it comes to the drafting aspect, having spoken with athletes at PTO, US Open, because that was, the broadcast for me was like, well, here's 4 people for the entire event that's all I'm going to watch. I guess that's all they're giving me. So I was really paying attention to the spacing and kind of the indicators on the broadcast that are just like landmarks we all use, like the spacing of the lines, etc. And it seemed as though, and I'd love to hear your feedback because I'm sure you collected all this data from the athletes themselves, and whatever you can tell me, it'd be great. It's still up to the referees to call penalties, right? It's still up to the external source of the race to make sure that these athletes are following the rules. And I heard that a lot of athletes were still letting that red light come on a lot more often, or it wasn't red. I think it was, what were the colors again? Can you run that through?
yeah. So if you're in the drafting zone, it's a red flashing light.
Red flashing,
It's
yeah.
it's on more than it's off, so it's about on for about 75%, off for 25%. So it's hard to miss, but it is flashing. The other 2 are solid. So then you go into a blue light 2 meters and an orange light for 3 meters.
Yeah. And I saw that you had put actual graphics on most bikes that I've seen come out of these events to show the athlete as a reference point at all times. This is what it means. So I heard there was a lot of red flashing lights and not a lot of things done about it. And I think it still falls on the organization, right? Like, this is a tool that you've organized, and why, I mean, do you have anything you can say as why PTO wasn't really as effective at still using the technology? And I heard there was like some delays sometimes with the red light. Sometimes it would not seem to be changing as fast as maybe the mind is processing it.
Yeah. So on the referee side, so we're only as good, I guess, as the worst interpretation or the worst referee. And with the 20 meters, there's 45 seconds to make a pass. So I don't think we can take TV or people riding past you and seeing some red flashing lights with too much seriousness. But when you do hear it from the athletes who are in the train and they're saying, so and so was just sitting there all day, then that's annoying to me. And it really reinforces that we need to get that next step going, where the worst the drafting information, we're calling it illegal time. So if you're over the 45 seconds or you're entering and dropping out many times, that's being flagged to the referee and you go to the top of a hit list, basically. We need to get that going pretty quick. But at the moment it's great for the athletes because they can tell what distance they're at pretty accurately. They don't have that anxiety of, is the referee gonna think differently, because it's clear, I'm in the blue, or I'm in the red, now I'm going to drop back to the blue, or I'm in the orange. I know I'm at a safe distance, and the referee thinks the same thing. Obviously there's still some athletes who are now going, well, if there's no ref there, I'm just gonna push the rules a little bit. And this is where it's still a referee's decision and they have to act on it. So end of the day, with those PTO races, while 20 meters and all the distances while you're riding are a lot closer than we expect, they feel close. You're at 20 meters, so even if you're pushing it to 18, you're doing a lot better than if you were at 10 meters. So
Yeah,
I think the races generally are pretty fair. There's some athletes that people will talk to you about at the bar after the race. This guy every race, or this girl, I yell at her and she does it every time. But I don't think that's going to go on much longer, and I don't think they're going to get away with it, as clearly. The lights aren't that visible on the broadcast, which is something we can improve as well. But I don't know if it's something that you want or not.
Could be a good thing.
Yeah, but on the whole, the majority of athletes are pretty happy now that they can race clean, and they know they're clean. They know the referee's not going to ping them for. They can just focus on their race and they don't have to worry about, am I too close? Does the referee agree? Anxious the whole way.
That makes sense. And I think even a short-term solution could be, since there are multiple laps with a lot of the PTO races, is you just put a hub in transition that every time the athletes roll through, it collects that, what did you call it when you're in the zone? Negative
illegal
time. Yeah. That collects negative time each lap. And before the race, you could say, all right, we understand this and this happens. However, if you come through on a lap and you've got over 3 minutes negative time, we're going to be watching you. And then if that happens again, then you're going to be in trouble. So I think even if the refs aren't doing their job, like, the data is the data. And, I think with passing, going back and forth, there's a lot of things to consider, but it just feels like from a central control unit, oftentimes what we've always had problems with, and we saw this in Lahti with Lionel Sanders versus Christian Blumenfeld, who did cross the center line on camera and was not penalized, versus Lionel. But it just depends on who's there at the time. So we've got still a lot of objectivity between referees even. So to take away all that, even a hub in the center that does collect the data, that even a head ref in a booth can make calls to the other refs and have communication. I think that's the biggest thing, is the communication between referees. We could improve on that if we want a more clean race. Now, obviously, we don't want to infringe and make it more complicated and more expensive. I mean, it's going to get more expensive before it gets cheaper, because this technology and everything has to be implemented and then pared down. But would you say that in the interim, that hub is a possibility, or you may or even have that already in mind?
Yeah, it's a way to do it. We're pretty quickly going to go to the speaking to the referees. So there's going to be, they're going to have basically like a modem on the motorbike with them, which is listening to everything around them, and that will show them the worst offenders, where they are in relation to that motorbike, and the latest data in real time. So,
Okay.
it's another way of doing it. But
Yeah.
most
You guys have your
races,
hands full.
most don't really have that central. You think of a referee in a prefab building behind a desk. The head referees are out in the course, and it's very, very rare that you'd have a referee actually sitting back in a nice air conditioned unit making calls like that, unfortunately. Yeah.
I mean, that would be on a short course format where you've got, maybe 15 to 25-minute loops. I think that the possibility of that is higher. Obviously, with a long, sprawled out race, the problem is these refs can't be everywhere. So you collecting the data and giving that to some way to, condense it all into really one strong package. Obviously, the hardware can do what it can do, but the software side, with AI and all these new technologies coming out, there's probably some crazy ways to put stats versus whatever you might want to see. So I'm sure the software side is where you all are really just geeking out.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you can do anything with software, and you can build anything really these days. Elon Musk can land a rocket upside down on a boat. It's you can do anything if you really want to. Just for our little sport, we just need to figure out what's the most important, but incrementally, and improve what we can so that we don't run out of money and it all comes to nothing. Yeah,
I think the way you've all have done it, and the scale and kind of getting it out there, it's been really smart. You haven't done what a lot of organizations have done within this sport, is just come out guns blazing without, with this somewhat proven concept. And then after a few years, it's unsustainable. It's not received well, and it fails. So I really like the stepped approach you all have taken. I'm sure that's just because it's a Kiwi. It's just how you all think. You're very conservative, and then you make it better.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Little steps, but like it seemed, on the outside it looks like little steps, but there's a lot going on in the background. So
yeah, I can't wait. So yeah, I think anything else you can share with the growth, future opportunities where I know the PTOs probably want you at more of their races, because obviously the athletes at 20 meters need that more than anybody on course to make sure that they're riding safe. But what is the outlook in the next year going to be?
Yeah, I think next year is going to be really big for us. As I say, I've just resigned from my job, and the plan is to move my family and I over to Europe from about March, April, and do a full season there, serving anyone who will have us, really. And yeah, as I say, there's obviously this new PTO series going to be announced soon, and the World Triathlon collaboration I think is really interesting. From what I understand and what I probably expect is that that's going to mean the level of officiating is going to be as if it's at a World Series event for World Triathlon. So there's a whole if you go onto the World Triathlon website and have a dig around there, and you go into their like documents and downloads section, there's obviously the competition rules, which is a huge document which has been worked on and refined over a number of years. But then there's also an event manual, which basically is, if you want to have an event sanctioned at different tiers by World Triathlon, you have to meet X, Y, Z, a million different standards. It's quite a challenge for an event to meet this.
I think for cup races, they pretty much just have to have water.
Yeah. If you've competed in those events, you go to a Continental Cup and it's pretty basic. Someone hand paints the 1, 2, 3 on the podium, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But when you get to that top World Series level, it's the transition may not be less narrower than XYZ, blah blah blah. There's every standard you can think of, and the officials that go to those events are the top level trained event officials, and they're volunteers, but it's kind of like their sport. They go to a few events a year, and the pinnacle is getting picked to officiate at the Olympic Games. And that kind of level of officials and organization under those frameworks of the competition standards and the event manual are going to now be applied, I understand, to PTO events, which will just be night and day over, I think, what they have currently. They currently have a guy who's doing his best. He's sort of, I guess, the Jimmy Riccatello of Ironman, the equivalent at PTO, Thomas, German guy, and he's obviously dealing with what he's given on the day. He's got some USAT refs one week. I don't know, probably Singapore Federation supplied some volunteers in Singapore, and they just kind of do their best. But I think that that whole level will increase, and we'll see some changes there.
Yeah, the PTO will probably hire out a traveling set of refs that they can fly around once they get the funding for that. I think some consistency is the biggest problem we all have in this sport. Is when you go to race in Mexico, there could be a guy on a shitty moped with a shirt on next to you that says official, and there's just crap happening all over the place, and you're yelling at him to do something. He just looks at you and he just wags his finger. And then after the race, you ask him why, and he's like, we don't really understand a lot of the rules that well, so we kind of just we look for the big ones. And I'm like, this is not consistent. What are you doing?
No, there's a lot of things going on there, but no, I think things generally heading in a good direction for the sport. And as I say, we'd love to be at all those PTO events. I think that's sort of the direction things are going. And then a whole lot based in Europe. There's a lot of racing in Europe to keep us busy. So there's probably we're building up to the Paris Paralympic event. So there's sort of a World Cup series of those we'll be going to. A lot of the challenge events are very interested as well, and some Ironman hopefully in there as well. So we can find more than enough races to keep myself and probably a couple others coming in for the odd weekend double up very busy next year.
Yeah, so I mean, the age group athletes who've listened to this show, they've probably heard the evolution of this product and seen it probably implemented now on some of the PTO races. And I think they're going to get more and more familiar as you roll it out and take better care of the athletes and keep the welfare of our sport at the top priority in terms of fairness and making sure that the prize money actually gets distributed to the right people who earn it and not are, gotten away with riding the moto tow for 100 and 200K sometimes. So I think that that's a great piece of technology. And just a final question, the state of triathlon, the general worldwide global scale of triathlon seems like it's in this weird area right now where Ironman World Championship, the 146 Kona event, seems to be maybe phasing itself into a different level of, I don't know, reliability, prestige. A lot of athletes may or may not want to still call it a world championship, and that might just be generational if it's Nice versus Kona. The PTO events kind of looking like they're going to be maybe 6 or 7 or 8, and then contracting athletes to go to certain races. You've got World Triathlon partnering with the PTO, not with Ironman. So I think you've got a lot of conflicting ideals, organizational goals, business plans, and the state of triathlon is just in a really kind of big influx, in my opinion. Now, how do you feel about working with all these different federations and governing bodies, and how has that been a really good thing, and how has it been a challenge?
Well, I can't say I know where everything's going in the sport, but it's definitely an interesting time for sure. For us, right from the start, it was really important to work with the International Federation, with ITU at the time, World Triathlon, and we went to them really early, and we also went out to challenge and to Ironman right from the get-go, just because obviously the bigger players in the sport, and all have been really interested, and they've become, I guess, they've stopped looking sideways at me like I'm crazy after a few years. So it's taken a while to get past that initial okay, just kind of nodding, yep, cool story. But no, it's definitely been good conversations and good to work with those groups. and they're sort of seeing now that, the concerns of the athletes are also sort of, timing is going really well for us in terms of, certain controversies happening, and, things like last weekend just do give us a little boost down then. I haven't posted on social media for probably a month and a half, just with all the travel that's been going on. I really should have been doing that. It's just not my thing. But in the last couple of weeks we had like another 300 followers on Instagram with basically nothing from us. It's all coming from other people talking about us, which is great. Rambling a bit here, but I think hey, we're happy to work with anyone, with all these groups. Obviously, when we get to that age group stage, the big player is Ironman, like by far, and then you've got Challenge, and then you've got a whole lot of independent events. I think in Europe the sport's super strong coming out of COVID. There's so many great events to do, and I think the mindset of I don't want to rubbish Americans, but the mindset is around sort of lifetime health and fitness is a lot more ingrained and more commonplace. And you get those athletes who are, I think you get a larger percentage of the field are athletes who are regularly doing races, and they do it for a number of years, versus a larger proportion of people who are just there to do one triathlon, whether it's a challenge or an Ironman, tick the box, get the tattoo, put it on their LinkedIn profile, and move on to, I'm never doing that again. I think there's a high concentration of those real, longer term athletes in Europe, and it's just so many thriving events. Alpe d'Huez, Gerard Mayer was on the other day. All these fantastic races.
What I'm hearing is the federations, the organizations, and working with all of them they all have, they want to make their events the best they can within the budgets they're allotted, and you all are eventually fitting into that, and that's great. And now they're seeing it as a value because the athletes are saying we want it. And the biggest issue, and this is something we're running up against too, is trying to start up a larger super league following in the US. Is US athletes' attention spans and the demographic of thought process as a culture is so different. I saw this just in France, like the last week, riding on this canal system that goes for hundreds of Ks, just a canal, paved canal path. And I rode it every time to get out into the countryside. And every time I'd see more people throughout the week, and randomly families and people sitting on the bank, just taking downtime. The American culture seems to be so wrapped up in how much harder can I work rather than how can I take care of myself and spend time with my family. The values, I think, of the European culture are quite different. And even the level of broadcast, I think, is way more accessible for French TV to put on a whole Super League on prime time. We had that in Toulouse, and we had hundreds of thousands of people just watching it in person. In the US, we're going to go to Malibu, and I doubt we're going to see anyone come out to make it a point to watch that event outside of family and close triathletes. So sports in general, if it's not football, basketball, I don't even know baseball anymore in the US, it's been tough. So I think that's kind of what I'm hearing from you is culturally, the US just still is part of this evolution of taking care of their own welfare with less killing themselves. It's stress, work, and everything, and more time on the important things.
Yeah, we got a bit deep there, I guess. I'm probably not the authority to talk on it, but yeah, that's the
I've just been thinking about that all week. So yeah, you just kind of reminded me.
But haven't spent that much time in the US myself, but definitely a bit of a different mindset, and lifestyle, fitness and health, and as you say, the short work weeks and those kind of things that these countries have, and
nothing's ever open in Europe. That is, I mean, especially on Sunday, nothing's open. They've like turned that, and I mean, it's annoying, but it's probably great. But anyways, I appreciate you riding that thin line. You didn't say anything bad about any organization. That was nice. I know there's things out there.
No, everyone, everyone's. I would say, like, about Ironman, like, I guess the biggest challenge, there are a lot of great people there, and they obviously put on amazing events. But I think the challenge has been navigating the organizational tree. Like, who do I talk to?
Yeah,
because you've obviously got my contact is Jimmy, and he's the head referee. But beyond that, there's just so many people, and when we operated at a couple of Ironman events earlier in the year, we'd sort of make contact with a couple of people, and it was all happening. We're going to turn up at the event this time, and suddenly I started getting contacted by a lot of other different people, and I didn't know how they really are connected, and that whole I guess there's just a whole lot more complexity and protocol to everything around what they do, because obviously they produce things to a super high standard. But I guess that's been a bit of a challenge. But hey, like, they're very intelligent people, and they do care about the sport. So yeah, we'll get there eventually with them, and we're working on it.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to wrap. You're still growing. You're still going to be out there next year, even better, stronger, with a better staff, more units. Man, it's cool to check in with you and see. I think this is a very vital aspect of our pulse of the sport, is if a company like Race Ranger is growing and the officiating is increasing, and scrutiny and technological advancements, that I think that bodes really well for our sport, because that's low hanging fruit that does cost a lot of money and time. So the fact that is growing really speaks a lot to the importance of the rules, the importance of these athletes earning a fair race result. So that's great. We're still growing. We're not failing as triathlons.
Definitely, yeah.
Well,
exactly.
We'll get you back on once I get to use it. I need to get into a PTO race. Don't worry.
We'll have to do a demo. We have to go for a ride together. Slap them on.
That's right.
At some point. Yeah.
But thanks, James. I know it's your bedtime, so thanks for joining us, and we'll catch up with you again probably in the next 5-6 months.
Thanks, Nick.
All right.
What's up?